All right. Welcome back. We're going to have one more conversation on facing the challenges of... I'm not on, am I? One more conversation. There we go. Thank you. One more conversation on facing the challenges of pastoral ministry with several of our speakers from today, and Nathan's going to be moderating.
Okay, you'll try to find him. You're not going anywhere.
18 Timothy O'Day.
So, I get the fun of asking the tough questions. I don't know why Aaron picked me. So, part of what we want to talk about is the real feelings that happen during being a pastor. The real stuff, the real challenges. We've heard some of it, like what it's like to work in the pastorate and all that kind of stuff, preparation, but there are some real struggles that happen in our families, in how much we create boundaries for how much we invest in the church and how much we invest in our own lives, and troubled members that seem to rise up within the church. So we want to talk a little about that and be real with our folks here. So how long have you been pastoring? 13 years. Tom?
I started in 83.
83.
Ever how long that's been?
22 for you. How long have you been pastoring now? 6, 7?
Yeah, you could say like 6 years.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Just come when you can, Timothy.
Yeah. We thought we were going to have another calling. All right, so let's just start. Tough stuff, okay? What's the most challenging aspects of personal ministry for your family? Let's just throw it right out there. Time to just share our hearts. Well, that was really good.
Well, I don't know. Let's see. Maybe I should ask them. Yeah, it's a reason I don't want to ask them, because I don't want to know what has been hard for them, because it'd break my heart. But the Lord, well, you know, I'm a seer, right? So yeah. I use the word vision a lot.
Yeah.
The Lord gave us a love for the local church, and He gave us a big vision. And I just drug my family around the world, and I know that had to be hard. And then we sent our kids to boarding school, and that was hard. Then we, under circumstances that were not good, we had to leave a church, and that was hard.
Yeah.
Things really hard on our family. But then also the greatest blessings have come to us from the church. And in the hardships along the way, it wasn't anything that made us not love the church, but the hardships came out of being in a position that you love the church and you want to see it planted, you want to see it grow, you want to see it be healthy. Mm-hmm. then the Lord brought us to Cornerstone, and Cornerstone has been, I think, a grand place of healing in all of our hearts, and so I'm so thankful for this church. But there were circumstances out there I think can be difficult. But my family they were just troopers all along. And I did hide the passports one time, but beyond that, they've been troopers all along. So
Good.
So one of the difficulties that has come for our family is also where we've seen a lot of the blessing with the relationships with people. So because we know a lot of people who are Latter-day Saints, and my kids love those people. So there was one night that we had one of our neighbors over, a guy that we had grown to know really well, who's LDS, and my kids loved him. He almost took on an uncle role in their life. And we had told them that he doesn't know the true God, and they were heartbroken. So heartbroken that one night we had him over for dinner, and Eli just goes up to him and says, do you know the true God? And he looks at Eli and he says, yes, I do. And Eli just lights up with excitement, and he runs over to Haley, and he's like, he knows the true God, he knows the true God, he knows the true God. And so, in that conversation, like, he's forced my hand. So it's like, I'd say, like, well, Eli, we actually disagree on who the true God is. But the positive of that is, like, Eli actually helped me get into a really good discussion with my neighbor about that. But it's also hard on them for that reason. So that's one of the difficulties my kids face. And I think probably this is true for most of our wives. The pain that you go through, they go through with you. And the time that you spend doing those things can sometimes take you away from the family. And that's difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
I really feel like we've got to cheat the system somehow. I think when another pastor's wife will approach Lily and say, let's talk about the difficulties of being a pastor's wife. She says this is a hard conversation to have, not because I have to tell all the bad stuff, but it's the other end of the scale. I feel like somehow we got to cheat everything. Obviously, those early years were difficult, but since my kids have come into the world, the Lord has just been so gracious to us. I love this church. Lily loves this church. My kids love this church, and they have good reason to. Lily was talking about you earlier and started crying.
I really am a painful subject.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So just that one person, was so rough. No, it's just been it's been so good. You almost feel guilty in some ways. I probably the hardship for my family would be just me. Everything that entails. But like even this, last it was funny. Lily laughed at me because Aaron gave me this topic of reflecting on 22 years, and so I went home yesterday, before this thing started back, because usually we take off half a day on Friday, and so I go home thinking I'm going to be with my family, but I'm just pacing around quietly because I'm all consumed with this thought and ready to get that over with. And so the fact that they have to live with somebody like me, who has trouble managing two things at once, but really it's been such an exceptional blessing, and I know it's exceptional. Yeah.
We're also so blessed. My kids get to see the church love us, and it's not a hard place for me to go. I love serving the people at Sharon Baptist Church, and they're such a joy to me. Unlikely, I don't feel guilty about it. So that's the difference in us. I'm grateful to receive it. I know it's undeserved. I got over that a long time ago, and I'm grateful they don't have to see that that layer of ministry where ministry in itself is challenging, and it's never done. You've never achieved what you want to achieve. Those things can be frustrating for me because I'd love to just control everything and just check off on my box. I can never do that in ministry. So there's that, but they don't have that extra layer of seeing the church opposed to their dad, and I'm so thankful for that. So the Lord's been so good. I'm grateful for it.
So you're hearing from guys who have learned to balance to some degree what's going on. That takes time. And we develop this, I hear a feedback, do you guys? We learn to develop over time. How much time do we give our wives? How much grace has God given our wives to feed back to us? Places when we see our wives starting to get insecure, and then we have to say, okay, we're probably over-investing in different places. All that begins to happen. All right, so we love the church. We know that. So here's a tough question. What happens when you find you have a divisive person in the church? So let's say you have a member and they're kind of going astray. They become divisive, stirring up trouble in the group of people that you love, and yet they are part of the people that you love. What do you do? How does it make you feel as a person? How does it affect your heart? What do you need to jump in and start thinking about doing in order to correct this problem? Because our guys are going to face that on a regular basis. I have fun questions, right?
Well, I don't think those things are best handled by saying, I just assume this will get better. One of the things we say when we go through the new members class, we go through the church covenant, is we say something like, we're going to love each other enough to run after each other if we're walking and running towards sin, toward our own destruction. And so I think, one, love compels you to run after that person, to help them, and it may well be. And then two, love hopes all things and believes all things, right? So your first assumption is this brother or sister, if he or she's being divisive, is being unintentionally divisive. Mm-hmm. And so I might be showing this, it's going to aid them to walk better. Of course, if that's not the case, then you call them to repentance. But I think and point out, I'm not calling you to anything that I don't call myself to, and others haven't had to call me to. But I do think that in those situations, it's hard, and it can be alarming to your heart because you do love the people, and oftentimes one of the things, the way my mind works, I think if I were to see somebody being divisive or something, is to think I just fear the harm they could cause to others as well. And so love for them, love for the body, I think compels you to say, run after them, assume the best, hope all things and believe all things. But yeah, love them enough if necessary to call them to holiness.
So I've got a thought on this, but I kind of want to hear from you guys too, what you think, because I don't think I've actually dealt with a person that I would call divisive within our church. Now, people have done things that I think have inadvertently caused division, but I think that's different from seeing somebody who's just like absolutely set on division. Have you guys experienced that? Would you make that distinction? Or? Okay. Yeah. So I've only really had experience with the people that are actually, I think, trying to keep everybody united, but they're going about it in a way that's actually being divisive. And a good example of that was this past year with COVID issues. Like, what's the best way to handle COVID issues? Like, what are we supposed to do? And I think most of the people I talked to in our church, they really had good intentions. But they had very strong opinions. And being able to sit down with people and see, okay, I actually think that your whole point is unity, and then helping them make a biblical case for their position. And then telling them, you can only lay as much conviction on that position as you can actually make a strong biblical case for it. So, for example, like if you want to make a biblical case that Jesus is the Christ, you can make a really strong case. So you should have a lot of conviction right there. But if you have a strong conviction about whether or not to do something when it comes to an issue related to COVID, you can't make a case that is as strong as that. So your conviction can't be as strong as that. And then we would go to Ephesians 4 and say, we have a unity that's been given to us by Jesus, and that's what we need to be pursuing to maintain. So how do we do that? We have to be gentle with each other. We have to be humble. We have to be patient, bearing with one another, and ready to forgive. So trying to make that the bread and butter, so to speak. This is the default of what we have to do. But again, I think that works with a person that actually wants unity, but they're just going about it in a divisive way. I don't know if that would work with a person of division. I just really haven't experienced that.
That sounded really good to me. I think not everyone is going to be in a position where there's this ready-made mechanism to confront, divisiveness in the body. I know that makes a lot of sense at Cornerstone because of years of faithful biblical teaching, and as brothers are going places where there's a foundation of biblical preaching and teaching, it's going to be easier to do those kinds of things. But you may be in a situation where that doesn't make sense, where there's just been this long history of people just passively accepting that there are people who are divisive and grumpy, and they may even go about it in ways, like I said, they think are helpful perhaps, or they never do anything openly enough that you can really call them on it because they're so wise about it. And I think in those moments, if I can, with the Lord's help, not make it such a personal thing with me, which is what I want. I want to make everything personal. I want to make everything about my pride. And if I can model that 2 Timothy 2, just patient, teaching, gentleness, the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome. Like I cannot serve the Lord and be quarrelsome and angry and frustrated. I don't want to see this person as my enemy, as an obstacle to overcome. I want to see them as someone to win by just steadily loving them and loving the Lord and loving the Word. If the Lord can give me grace to do that, again, maybe this is for the situations that aren't quite as explosive where you're having to deal with it, even if there's no background for dealing with it or not. But I think a lot of people will face those kinds of things where you're just called to walk out this humble, tender, gracious example. I think that the Lord vindicates that in the end. I know that He does, but it's hard to trust the Lord with that. But that's where I would encourage a lot my students or brothers serving in various places.
Yeah, I think that we can have such anxiety because we want to see everyone persevere. We want to go to the celestial city together. And that presses us to love and to suffer long and to work hard at helping people, at loving people, and listening, hearing what's being said, or hearing what's not being said. And you have great anxiety, which I know Jesus told us not to be anxious. And I realized that He understood how big that command is. And I struggle with the anxiety side of that. But it's anxiousness for people to let's walk together, because I'm of the conviction that if we have the Spirit of God, we can work these things out. Mm-hmm. We can walk together. And I just want so much for that to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have a little fun. What's your favorite book of the Bible and why? And don't you all say Revelation. Right.
Yeah, the one Lee's preaching through, whatever he says, it's always my favorite. It's funny. The hardest text is always the one I'm working on, and it's always the one I love the most. Lee made me really love the Psalms, and I owe him a debt of gratitude for that. He made me preach those for like 8 years, and
There are 150 Psalms.
there's a lot of, and we're going to preach every single one of them, and they're worthwhile, yes, they are, and I do love them. I love the minor prophets. I think Micah has been such a good book. I really enjoyed preaching through it, and I think because they give you such a comprehensive theology of the Old Testament, and then they look to the New Covenant for fulfillment, and that just excites me to absolutely no end. And that's why I love it, because it just excites me to see that and to read it and to think about it and to see what God's working out in the world.
I will also say you did an excellent job on Song of Solomon.
Yeah, that's somebody else's this time around.
So Tom's favorite book of the Bible is the Psalms and all the minor prophets. Huh?
Yeah.
You can't. There's 66.
That left a few for you guys.
Man, good grief. It probably moves. I think the one that was most helpful for me preaching through it was Galatians. I needed it. Personally, it was, I'd come back from Louisville. I was a bit anxious about re-engaging with the church. And that was the book I dove into. Very tempted to be legalistic in my heart toward myself, and needed the message of that book, and that one might be it.
I love Ecclesiastes. I preached through that about, I guess, 2 years ago now, and it's just so realistic about life in a broken world, but also so hope-giving that God gives joy even in an imperfect life. And I think I spent a lot of my younger years wasting time just being frustrated and grumpy and worried when there's always going to be something. There's nothing's ever going to be perfect this side of glory, but there's every reason just to be encouraged and to find joy in just the simple good gifts of the Lord every day. And so it helps me. I continue to need it and continue to return to it, but I really love Ecclesiastes.
I don't have a deep answer to this question, so I'm just going to say the Gospel of John, because that's what I'm preaching through right now. So that's what I'm spending a lot of time in. So I think it's just similar to what you guys are saying. Whatever I'm spending time in, that's presently what seems to be forming me the most, convicting me the most. So it's giving to me right now. Yeah.
Good. This will just be fun for you all. I set you up. They're not all tough questions. So what's it been like to enjoy the love of a local church that you've invested in for a long period of time? Because not everybody has that, right? So what's that like? What's it? We often talk as pastors that, part of our role as leaders of our own households is to be at the right church that's good for us and our families, right? And we have enjoyed the love of people who we've had to repent before, we've had to train, we've had to do all kinds of different things, but we've also walked with and shared their sorrows, and they've shared ours, and we've been here for one another, What's it like to enjoy that and to trust it?
Easily one of my favorite things in the world. I mean, I love it. Just singing with these people on Sunday mornings is good. a number of years ago when actually Lily was pregnant with Michael, so a number of years ago, she was at a baby shower, and Barbara Perry was speaking, and my mom and Lily's mom were both there, and Barbara was making reference at the shower to some hard things we had walked through, and then she points to my mom and Dottie's mom and says, well, you've walked much more closely with them through this than we have. And that actually wasn't true. I'd walked much more closely with Barbara Perry than my own mom or Lily's mom. And so again, it was Jesus' idea, but to have a family, fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, is just one of the richest blessings in life. And to genuinely love people and be loved by them, it's heaven on earth.
Yeah, the scripture says Jesus loved the church and gave himself for it. And I developed a conviction early on that I should love it too. If he loves it, I should love it. And so life has been a love affair with the local church. And then to be at Cornerstone, because you go through your life, you experience a lot of things, but to be at Cornerstone and to look out at the congregation, and the thought that always comes to my mind before I say a word is, I love these people, and I can't believe that God is letting me do this. And I don't know why I can't believe that God would let me do something this fun and this enjoyable. I mean, that's who God is. So I guess that speaks to my messed up view of God, and to my trauma, But I do, and just to experience that, I never get up in the morning and think, good grief, I got to go to work today. That just never happens. And I'm so thankful to have that experience.
So between the time when we moved here and we actually planted the church in Lehigh, we had our second child, Eli. And sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone. And after we had Eli, we were alone. The Thompsons were there, but they actually lived 30 minutes away at the time. And it was a very depressing time because it was very hard. I was working full time. Haley was at home with 2 kids. And we had memories when church members would come over and hold Julia so Haley could take a nap. And that wasn't happening now. Lots of instances like that. And it was, during that time period, you realize, man, it is so good to have this treasure of this regular affection from the church. And I don't think I took it for granted before. But I would say now it's very, very sweet, so that I'm almost always surprised by it. So even a kind word that, after you preach a sermon, and somebody comes up and they say, that really helped me, and they lay out how it helped them, that is just a treasure. It's just a treasure, worth everything. Or even just hearing from somebody that they prayed for me. I just don't assume it. I don't ever want to assume it, but it comes, and it can be so energizing to continue on, to realize that all of our labor, none of it is in vain. Even if even if you weren't loved in return, right? It's never in vain. And so, to treasure the love that you do get, even in the smallest things, which are not small, none of it's small. It's very fueling. It's inspiring.
Some of my favorite Sundays are when we take the Lord's Supper together as a church family, and we do it a couple of different ways. Sometimes we'll distribute it through the the crowd, and then sometimes they'll come to the front, be served to the front. And lately, since COVID, we've done kind of a Cornerstone-esque service. I consulted with Lee on that, like the double, like the bread and the juice and all, one little package. But I love seeing them come to the front, to get out of their seats, to come into the aisle, and come to the front. Well, it just says, it says something about their personal identification with the gospel and with the Lord. It says something about their desire to be reassured that the gospel's true and that they still believe it. And when I'm not a priest performing any ritual at the front, making that anything effectual or anything like that, but that I get to just affirm that we believe this together. This gospel is saving us, and the Lord is leading us and caring for us, and we get to share life together. It is the most precious gift in the world. So I love to see their faces and think about their stories, and each one is God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus with this unique story, plan, path that the Lord is leading them on. It's different from mine, and yet it's the same Savior who's leading, and I get to be in on it to a degree that really nobody else in the church is. I get invited into these sacred moments when they're making big decisions, or they're burying a parent, or they're having a child, or there's been an answer to prayer. I get to be in on those things, and it is just such a sacred privilege.
I'm glad we have another crier up here.
Yeah.
It makes me feel very comfortable.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's why they gave me the historical topic. They hoped I wouldn't cry very much.
You know, years ago, I would go to the association, or just meetings, I should say, some meetings with other pastors, and it became very common to hear of pastors using that time to complain to one another about their churches. And this is one of the reasons I love Eric so much, and I reach out to him a lot on issues, is because I know when I call this brother that I'm calling someone who loves the people he gets to pastor, and the way that I love the people I get to pastor, you know, and you can't just assume that, right? So it's just a precious gift. So thank you for you, brother.
It's mutual. Yep.
Well, this question has been asked by almost every panel, so we're going to throw it back out. And Timothy, you've kind of already answered. If you want to sit back on this one, you can. But besides Bible study, prayer, learning your task, all that kind of stuff, what would be some tips you'd give aspiring pastors that's important to walk long term with a group of people as they develop? I took all the sweet ones away, so, you know.
I feel like I keep starting, but so this is my last time to start. But two things, I think. One, shared before, one of my favorite stories is when Ray Ortland Jr.'s dad is dying, and his last words he gives to Ray are, "Ministry isn't everything Jesus is." I think that's really key. Actually, Timothy pointed this out in his session, that when we know God's love for us and are moved to love Him in return, that's how we're enabled to love others and to walk with them. And and just the doing it over for the long term, for a lot of seasons, I think is just to for me, just start every day like that. I think the most important thing each day is just to remember God's love for me. And as I do that, it just aids me in loving others, and it draws me to those whom I know God's love for them as well. And so I think that's probably been key in my life. And how I would advise people, right? Make Jesus and realizing His love for you primary.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be at a church and just pastor there until I fall over dead, and then let them bury me.
Could you do that at home, though?
Yeah.
Not here?
Yeah. You never know where it's going to happen. That seems so far away, but it was a longing because I became convinced that I think if we're going to do what it is God is calling us to do by His grace, it is a long haul thing. And just like Eric was saying in his historical presentation, it's a long haul thing. But I grew up in churches. My dad was a pastor. The longest we ever lived anywhere was 3.5 years. Then being on the mission field, that's a very dynamic kind of place. And it's just a different kind of thing. But then to be here at Cornerstone, and I think, well, just by God's grace, maybe I'll be able to be here till I just go be with the Lord. And that is a happy thought for me. But I just think it takes that for things to happen that need to happen. For churches to be strong, for the Great Commission to be worked out in the life of a body, and it's a long haul thing.
I agree completely with that. It'd be hard to add to it. One key to persevering for us in one place has been we just have given our hearts away to Him, and it's hard to imagine. I want to be open to whatever the Lord wants to do in my life, but it's hard to imagine me choosing to do something different or to go somewhere else with a different group of people. I'm sure that would be wonderful if that's what the Lord called us to do, but as far as me just making my choice, I just have too much invested in these relationships. It's not just a professional, there's not a professional distance. It's not just a job that I do. That's part of what makes pastoral ministry so hard, is it's so consuming, and it doesn't stay in a neat little box or compartment in your life. But that's also what makes it so rich. Lee and I joke, it's what's grinding us into the ground. It's going to put us in an early grave, but we wouldn't have it any other way. We just love them too much. And I don't want to preach my funeral anytime soon, but I want to get to preach their funeral. I want to do the wedding. I want to be there when their children profess faith. I just want to be there for that. Yeah. And so for me, it's not even difficult. The difficulty for me would be pushing me the other way, convincing me that there'd be some other work somewhere else, because I don't know any other way to do it than that long term. We're going to try to give all of ourselves to the Lord and all of ourselves to you, and then we're just going to see what the Lord does with that.
Yeah, I think there's something important. God does call pastors from churches and takes them to another one and so on and so forth. But if you can begin the process with saying, I'm content where the Lord has put me, whatever that turns out to be, your heart settles and love begins and you become a part of it, and you start putting down roots. And the Lord can always change that, of course. But yeah, I think the happiest pastors I've ever seen have been guys that just said, we're here until we want to fall over dead, wherever that is. Okay, so let's make it easy. Let's do one more. When you're old and gray, and a couple of us already are, and you've pastored for decades, what do you want to look back over your life and say took place in the local church that you serve, both in you and in them?
It is my favorite text in Paul's letters. It's Romans 16. It's the big list of names that he has at the end of this letter. So all this theology, all this doctrine, and you get to this big list of names of people he wants to greet and say hello to, because they're people who the Lord's given him. Paul was probably cut off from his family when he trusted in Jesus, but Jesus made that promise that's been referred to, I think, some this weekend, that if you have to leave your family to follow me, I'll give you back a family 100-fold in this life. And we see that happening for Paul. So he's got this list of people who've served with him, ministered with him, bailed him out of jail, taken beatings with him, people who were mothers to him and prepared meals, all this kind of thing. And they're bound. There's no reason why they should be bound together except for Jesus Christ. And so, man, I just hope I have a list, you know. That's what I want. I heard Fred Craddock, who we would disagree with theologically probably for a lot of reasons. But he's a good West Tennessee boy, and he's an incredible preacher. He preached a sermon on the list one time, and he talked about somebody, you know, going into heaven, and St. Peter at the gate says, you know, what's that you got there? And it's just this crumpled up list of names that you gave yourself away to for the Lord's sake, and who he gave to you. And I hope just, you know, every person was valuable because they're created in God's image, because they're saved by the Lord Jesus, they're loved by him, entrusted to you. Everyone was important, every name. So their name, and people clutter up your life. They make it harder to get things done that you want to get done. They're not efficient. It's not an efficient. So I'm having to preach this to myself because I love to be efficient. Productivity is the great idol of my heart, I think. Or I could have some other idol that's so insidious, I don't know what it is, but I think productivity is the great idol of my life, and that list of names just really militates against that. But that's where the presence and the love of Jesus is, I think, is when we come together with God's people. We've got that list of names, so that's what I want.
So I'm going to say that a little bit differently, and it might sound like I'm contradicting you, but I'm not. Because I'm actually going to say the exact same thing. It just sounds a little bit different. Because when I was younger, I really wanted to be remembered by people. So almost the desire being that they would, at the end of my life, they would say, he was so faithful. He was so good. He helped me so much. But now I realize what I really hope people will say is just, Jesus is so great. He's so good. And that I'll be able to say, you know, at the end of it all, really be able to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Because I don't need to be remembered by everybody else. Jesus remembers me. He wants me. So that's enough. And so I can turn my life over to actually pointing people to Christ, and I will rejoice if what they are holding supremely before them is his love and knowing him and having him. Which again, I think is the exact same thing what you're saying, right? Just from a different angle, right? Because what I guess I do want to be remembered for then is for that, right? It's he helped me know the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, hairs are gray and gone. And what I desire, I think, more than anything is that we get to the celestial city together, and there's the family of God. These are people you've known, people you've loved, people you've preached to, people who've exhorted you, invested in your life, just people whom you've walked with. That's just a joy, I think, that's there. Jesus endured the cross for the joy that was set before him, and I think in his kindness he has set joy before us as well to pursue in pastoring the church. And I don't think pursuing that kind of joy in this is at all wrong. I think it's the thing we ought to do.
I think I would want to be able to say of the church that they know the Lord loves them, and they love him in return. And I think I just want the same thing to be said about me, that they know that I know I'm loved by God and loved him in return, and hopefully saw that and modeled that. I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't think there's anything more important than that we know his love for us and love him in return. And that's what I pray for my kids every day. And so, yeah.
Yeah, there's a place, I think it's in Corinthians, where it talks about there's going to be a time when our works will be tested. And a lot of it's going to be burned up with fire like straw and all that kind of stuff, but the goal is that we're surrounded by genuine believers who have walked by faith and enjoyed the Lord. And that we'll spend eternity with them. I can't imagine, I don't think any of us can, what it's going to be like for all the saints, the ones that have come before us now and the ones that are yet to be, when we're all gathered together at one time. I listened to the singing and, just for 100 or 300 people. I wonder what it would be like to praise the Lord with every saint. And I think if I wanted to leave something behind when I die, it will be that the ones we had a chance to love and have loved us would be solid in it and would know the depth of the love of the Lord as much as we can anyways. And that we found in the middle of this wicked world, we found some real solace in that as people, and that we began to understand how extraordinary the church is, because it's a very unique being that God has created. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate you sharing your heart. And thanks for being a crier. I really do appreciate it. Yeah.
Man, I'm tempted to see something real quick with you guys up here. These brothers, one thing I didn't share last night is when Nathan came to Cornerstone, he's almost to the day. He's 6 days shy of being 20 years older than me. And first thing he said when he came to Cornerstone was, I'm here to serve you. And humanly speaking, without Nathan, I don't think I would have survived. And immensely grateful for him. I owe him everything. And then when the Lord brought Tom, when you guys agreed to hire Tom Fox, there's no one better that you could have brought in at the time you brought Tom. He's willing to do everything and anything. And I told him, I remember one day when he started, and I said, I can't get the stool in the baptistry not to float. And he spent the day with me searching a yard in the landscaping to find a center block, and we rigged it up. And then he started tweeting the church or whatever about adventures of Tom and Lee, and but he's the perfect guy to work with every day, and I loved it, and it changed my life. And so apparently I'm riddled with much more guilt than Eric, because I feel guilty that I get when you came on to work. I thought, I want to say to guys, if you want to persevere in ministry, then let a guy like Tom Fox come along and work with you, but that you can't have that all the time, and the Lord's been gracious. And Timothy was great. Timothy mentioned he came from a very hard place. We have people share their testimonies on Sunday nights when they join the church, and Timothy's first words, if I remember correctly, were something like, I've been hurt and I don't trust anyone in the church. And over the time he walked with us, you're like a son to me, brother, and I love you. Seeing you go is one of the hardest things in the world, and seeing you back is one of the most rewarding. I almost couldn't stand it when you just got up and started talking this morning. And Eric, you're my favorite pastor that I don't get to pastor with. I love you. You're the one I reach out to outside of these guys when I just don't know what to do. And always know I trust your love for the Lord and love for people. And, resonate with your heart. Thank God for you, brother. I love you. Just great brothers. And I wish there were opportunities, right? We talk about
getting gray and doing your friends' funerals, right, the rest of your life, pastoral ministry. I wish there were more opportunities like this, right, just to outdo one another in showing honor, right? And so, man, hard not to take advantage of it when I'm sitting with these brothers. So.
Our last session will be at 4:15. Can you announce that?
Our last session will be at 4:15.